Doctor Who 60th Anniversary Special Number 1, The Star Beast. I will start with a recap of the episode, and then the review will follow. This episode opens with some exposition from the Doctor and from Donna. They are going over the history of what happened to Donna and how she can't be allowed to remember the Doctor or she will die. Donna states how she has a nice life with a nice fella and a nice house and the most beautiful daughter in the world, but she knows there's a hole in her memory and something is missing from her past. The main story begins with the Doctor parking the TARDIS and walking to this shopping area where he sees someone carrying a large amount of packages and goes to help. He takes some of the boxes off the top and finds Donna Noble. He quickly puts the boxes back, but Donna is incensed by the lack of help and says, "Oi, do you mind?" It's clear she didn't recognize the Doctor. The Doctor reluctantly comes back and lifts the boxes back off Donna's stack. Donna starts calling out to Rose. The Doctor freaks out because he thinks that Donna's calling to Rose Tyler. But instead, she is actually calling her child, who is also called Rose. At this point, a spaceship crashes in the background, and in typical Donna Noble style, she misses the whole thing while busy looking in the other direction. Donna and New Rose take off, and the Doctor heads for a taxi, which turns out to be driven by Donna's husband. The Doctor tries to use his psychic paper, but it still states he's a mistress in a nod to Jodie Whittaker, so we're still acknowledging that. Donna's husband, Sean, takes the Doctor to the crash site. It's established that Donna kept the last name Noble instead of taking her husband's last name. It's established that their child took Donna's last name too. It's also established that Donna gave away the money she won in the lottery from the ticket the Doctor had given her for a wedding present. So Donna's husband Sean is driving a taxi instead of living in the lap of luxury. The family can barely afford the house that they have. At the crash site, we find that UNIT is back, so at least the dissolution of UNIT has been undone. The Doctor gets into the site, and it's obvious the spaceship didn't crash, but has safely landed. Donna and her child are walking down the street, and some other kids come up on their bikes and call Donna's kid Jason. Donna's going to talk to the other kid's mother, but her kid says just to let it go. Donna's mom, Sylvia, is in the kitchen making dinner. We learn that Donna lost her job, and it's Donna's fault. Sylvia is relieved Donna didn't see the spaceship, and Sylvia insists that spaceships aren't real. Sylvia tells New Rose, "You look absolutely gorgeous," and New Rose goes to take the boxes out to the shed. That's when Sylvia asks Donna if it's all right to say New Rose looks gorgeous, or is it sexist? Donna reinforces New Rose's status as extraordinarily beautiful and how lucky Donna is. And I will come back to this in the review portion because I have something to say about telling your children how beautiful they are. Then Donna brings up her grandfather, Wilf, and how he used to talk about little green men and how that stopped when Donna had her breakdown. Donna says that she sometimes feels like something is missing, like she had something lovely and it's gone. How she should be happy, but some nights she just lies in bed thinking, what have I lost? We then see New Rose at the garbage bins when New Rose's friend Fudge runs up and says an escape pod from the spaceship landed nearby. New Rose leaves Fudge to go find a phone, where New Rose hears rustling by the trash bins and discovers a creature that looks like Gizmo from Gremlins, and a cat had a baby. The thing is called the Meep, and tells New Rose it's being hunted. We then see Fudge come face to face with big grasshopper-looking aliens that are hunting the Meep. The Doctor is using his sonic screwdriver to draw a rectangle in the air, which magically fills in as some kind of touch screen. The Doctor is using it to study the landed spacecraft. The UNIT scientist rolls up in her wheelchair and identifies herself as Shirley, the UNIT scientific advisor. The Doctor identifies himself as being the UNIT scientific advisor number 1. However, I believe that was actually Liz and not the Doctor, but that's neither here nor there at this point. The Doctor tells the new scientific advisor that there are 2 factions of aliens based on the scorch marks on the spacecraft. The Doctor does an info dump on Shirley, the scientist, about his history, Old Face, and Donna, which was clearly for the audience's benefit. The Doctor even refers to Donna's daughter as Beautiful. And the science advisor tells the doctor to just leave because apparently she doesn't need his help. What we really need to know next is that New Rose brought the Meep home and it's hiding in the shed. Donna discovers it and says, "What the hell is that?" Sylvia's trying to convince Donna it is not real, and Sylvia is really not happy when the doctor starts pounding on the front door asking her to let him in. She won't let him in, so the doctor uses his sonic screwdriver to let himself in the front door. That's when Sylvia slaps the doctor across the face. When Sean gets home and walks in on the scene, he just pauses and says, "Something smells nice." And Sylvia says, "Tuna madras." Meanwhile, possessed unit soldiers are amassing outside, as well as the grasshopper aliens. The doctor asks about Wilf, and Donna says he isn't with us anymore. The doctor assumes that this means Wilf is dead, but he isn't. He just lives in an assisted living facility now. The doctor refers to the Meep as a him, and New Rose points out that the doctor was assuming the Meep's preferred pronouns are he, him. The doctor apologizes to the Meep for assuming and asks the Meep what the Meep's preferred pronouns are. The Meep says that the Meep goes by the definite article of the Meep. The Meep then goes on to say that the Meep is being hunted for the Meep's beautiful fur. But then the universe said fur was wrong, so these warriors that look like grasshoppers slaughtered their livestock. The doctor then stated that the Meep was a fashion victim and everyone else in the room just cringed. The possessed soldiers are at the front door. The grasshopper guys blow their way in through the back door. The doctor uses his sonic screwdriver to draw a pair of shields so everyone can escape up the stairs. They make it to the attic, and the doctor uses the sonic screwdriver to bust through the brick and go to the attic of the house next door. And he continues doing this house to house until he comes to the house where Sean's taxi is parked outside. They make it outside. Everyone piles into the taxi except for the doctor. He stops to take the pulse of an unconscious unit soldier and is seen by the grasshopper guys, who shoot their weapons at the car, and the doctor and the crew inside the car drive away to safety. The doctor drives to a parking garage where he pulls a British barrister wig out of his coat, puts it on, and says this court is now in session. He then pulls out his sonic screwdriver, says, "Intercept teleport," and two of the grasshopper guys materialize. The doctor invokes the Shadow Proclamation and then starts an inquiry, and it becomes obvious that the grasshoppers are the good guys and the Meep is the bad guy. The Meep then kills the grasshopper guys. Donna looks at the Meep and says she was right, the Meep is a monster, and the Meep tells Donna she's stupid and has a weird child. The Meep takes everyone hostage and heads for the spaceship. It's established that the Meep's spaceship's dagger drive operates by stabbing into the Earth and extracting its fuel. This will destroy everything within a 5-mile radius. The Meep doesn't care and starts the ignition sequence and tells the possessed unit soldiers to put the doctor and crew on board, and the Meep will decide which one to eat first. The elevator with the doctor and company opens on the 3rd level, and Shirley, the unit science advisor, is there with her weaponized battle wheelchair that shoots tranquilizer darts at the possessed unit soldiers. She tells Donna and her family which way to go to escape, and then fires what appears to be some sort of rocket or missile at a cement block wall, blowing a hole in it, with no recoil impact on her wheelchair whatsoever. The doctor runs through the hole. Donna tells her husband to take New Rose and the family 10 miles away, and that she is going to go help the doctor. The doctor and Donna make it inside the spacecraft, and there's this weird divider that comes down and makes it so that the doctor can only access half the instruments in the small little room. In order to stop the ship and save everyone, the doctor needs Metacrisis Dr. Donna so that she can operate the instruments on the other side of the divider. The Meep's dagger drive is causing giant cracks to open in the ground, and it looks like fire or lava or something is down in the cracks. Miraculously, these cracks appear to only be going down the streets, and it doesn't look like any houses are falling in. Donna wants to help, but the doctor tells her if she does, she'll die. Donna points out that if she doesn't, her child and 9 million other people will die. The doctor rattles off a series of words that unlock Donna's memory. Donna remembers. Together, the doctor and Donna stop the ship, and the ground closes up like nothing happened. Donna collapses, and it appears that Donna is dead. The possessed soldiers make their way in, and it looks like it's all over for the doctor and Donna. But then the Meep orders the possessed unit soldiers to destroy the doctor, and we see New Rose's hand flipping switches. The possessed soldiers stop, and the possession light leaves their bodies. The doctor and the Meep are confused by what just happened, and Donna wakes up. New Rose tells the doctor and Donna it's safe for them to come down. Then the doctor blurts out, "Too much power for one person, but you had a child!" And the metacrisis passed down, a shared inheritance. We flash to Donna repeating binary like she did when she was initially having a meltdown, when she was having the Dr. Donna metacrisis. And when she remembered the doctor, she said that same binary, binary, binary. And then we see New Rose respond with non-binary. New Rose chose the name Rose. The shed was of Donna's memory of the TARDIS. The stuffed animals New Rose makes are based on the creatures Donna encountered when she was with the doctor. New Rose was born with Metacrisis Donna's memories. The doctor says, "We're binary." Donna says, "And she's not." Together they say, "Because the doctor is male and female," and New Rose says, "I'm neither, I'm all." The Meep threatens to blow up the spaceship. The doctor flips a switch, and the Meep is ejected from the ship. The grasshoppers arrest the Meep, and the Meep is going to prison for 10,000 years. The Meep tells the doctor that a two-hearted creature is rare, and the Meep is going to tell the boss about the doctor. To which the doctor says, "Cryptic, I hate that." The doctor then turns to Donna and New Rose to address the metacrisis. Donna tells the doctor it's a pity he isn't a woman anymore, and New Rose tells him they understand something a male-presenting Time Lord could never understand. They can just let it go. Donna and New Rose let go of the Time Lord power, and they're just fine. Then New Rose says, "After all these years, I'm finally me." At the end, the Doctor and Donna get into the TARDIS to go see Wilfred. The interior of the new TARDIS is very stark and empty. Awful, really. There's now a coffee machine in the console. Donna spills her coffee on the console, and it catches fire, and the TARDIS goes out of control. The end. Ugh. I mean, one thing I did leave out was before the Doctor and Donna got into the TARDIS to go see Wilf, it's established that Donna's husband doesn't feel concerned about the Doctor and Donna going away together without him, which seemed pretty insulting to the Doctor. I don't know. I mean, that seemed kind of assumptive on his part, that there wouldn't be anything between the Doctor and Donna for some reason. I'll just leave it at that. The sonic screwdriver apparently is now a magic wand, so I didn't really care for that. I don't know if that was in the original comic that this was allegedly based on. Well, part of it was based on, but obviously parts of this were not based on that because the original comic was actually a Tom Baker Doctor comic story. So obviously the 14th Doctor and Donna were not part of the original story. They kept making a big deal about why the Doctor's face had returned from the 10th Doctor to the 14th Doctor. We have some theories about that, and I'll let the old man talk about that in a second. I'll just start out with talking about that comment that Sylvia made about gorgeous New Rose, and is it sexist to tell New Rose that they're gorgeous all the time? And the answer to that is yes. When I was younger, I actually took a number of human development and family studies classes. I took all sorts of psychology classes. I took a bunch of women's studies classes before it became gender studies. One of the things that was talked about was that you don't want to be telling your daughters how gorgeous they are all the time. You don't want to be focusing on their looks like that, because what you want to be telling them is how intelligent they are, how capable they are, how clever they are, how creative they are, anything but how gorgeous they are all the time. And that's all they ever said to New Rose, how gorgeous New Rose was. And the reason you don't want to do that is because you don't want to raise your daughters to feel that their worth, or to believe that their worth, is tied up in their looks. So yes, the answer to Sylvia is yes, it is sexist. Not just because you wouldn't tell your son how beautiful and gorgeous they are, but because it actually damages your daughter to be that focused on their appearance. I just want to say, I mean, what a horrible message. I'm going to say this to Russell Davies. What you did there was bad. You are not supposed to tell your daughters that. There's a lot more I would like to say about that as to why there's another group that thinks they need to be told all the time how gorgeous they are. But I don't want to get canceled on YouTube. I'll just say that. So it's clear to me you don't talk to your daughters like that. So if you wouldn't say it to your son like that, then you shouldn't say it to your daughter like that either, for those reasons. You don't want your daughters to grow up thinking that their whole worth is tied up in how pretty they are. That is sexist. So, with that being said, I will ask the old man, what did you think?
This was the first installment of a 3-episode 60th anniversary. And anniversaries, when you're doing a 60th or a 50th, I made the assumption that you're celebrating. An anniversary should be a celebratory thing. This was not that. This was extremely disappointing for me. When the credits came up at the end here, I wasn't sure how to feel because I had very high expectations about what I was expecting here. And to build on what you were saying, there was a lot of offensive material in this episode. You say Sylvia slapped the doctor. The way he recoiled, I mean, it almost looked like a punch to me. Physical violence was not okay in 2005, and it's definitely not okay in 2023.
Regardless of the sex of the person doing the slapping and who's being slapped, you don't get to go around hitting people. It doesn't matter who you are or what you think you are. You don't get to go around hitting people. That is wrong.
There were so many pieces here that were offensive. At the ending there, when New Rose and Donna were telling the doctor, you know nothing, we know everything, or we know all, something like that. And then you saw like the camera went over to David Tennant's face. What this reminded me of, and the more I thought about it, the more this whole episode reminded me of this. But I know a lot of our viewers on our channel subscribe because of our Star Trek material. And this reminded me of the first episode of the first season of Picard, when Picard went to that admiral and she told him some sheer effing hubris. We've all seen the meme. If you haven't seen Star Trek Picard, I'm sure you've seen the meme over the past few years of that, where sheer effing hubris and you see Picard just looking kind of confused. That's how David Tennant looked. In fact, this whole installment reminded me of a mixture of the first season of Picard and this very last season of Picard, where in the first season he was making this apology tour, Picard was. And in this last season, they brought in a bunch of Next Generation people to try to get people to connect this with the Next Generation franchise. And so there was a while at the very beginning when we were both praising the episode for, man, Will Riker's back. That really felt like Will Riker. And we were going on like that for like the first episode or two. And then it just kind of went off the rails. The question in this Doctor Who first installment, David Tennant's doctor kept asking, why do I have my old face? This is unusual for a Time Lord to regenerate and get an old face back. I think, based on what happened here with Donna, I think it's so he can go on an apology tour. I'm starting to think these next 2 episodes are nothing more than him traveling around with Donna and apologizing, which is funny because Tennant's doctor, another meme is David Tennant's doctor had a phrase of, I'm so sorry. And then he would try to give comfort to whoever was in a bad situation. But in that case, he actually was sorry for what was unfolding. But I think this is going to be a Picard apology tour where he has to go through and apologize for all the wrongs that he did, Dr. Donna being one of them.
I'm sure a lot of people have either seen or heard about that Children in Need skit where Davros is now no longer in his life support unit, and he appears to be an able-bodied man now. And I have to wonder if this 14th Doctor, David Tennant, going on an apology tour isn't a self-insertion by Russell Davies as far as going around apologizing for offensive things, at least in his mind, like using Davros, a villain who is a wheelchair user, because apparently there's this long history of showing people with disabilities as being evil.
But he was no more in a wheelchair, Davros, than a Dalek would be.
Or that Max guy from Voyage of the Damned.
He was in a life support system. The bottom half looked like a Dalek. In fact, he had pieces of him that looked like he was trying to integrate Dalek technology into him. Mm-hmm. So I never assumed he was in a wheelchair. I just assumed that was a mid-transformation to try to get his organic being to become more Dalek-like. That's how I interpreted it anyway. So I never saw it as a person in a wheelchair.
No, I saw this as basically someone who'd screwed with genetics, was trying to cheat death, and he was basically just this terrible corpse-like thing that, was using a Dalek assembly to move his body around at this point. I never saw him as disabled. Maybe Russell has a problem with a screwed up body being a consequence of doing bad things to it, but ask anyone who smoked for 50 years and then got cancer. There are consequences when you mistreat your body. Why are we not allowed to talk about that anymore? It doesn't make you evil to pay the consequences for actions. Hell, it's not always your fault.
That would be like saying we can no longer talk of Darth Vader, which he also was in a life support suit. How did he get damaged? Because he went a little bit weird in the head and Obi-Wan Kenobi had to stop him. That was the consequence of him trying to grab too much power. So that's a reminder. Every time you hear that ventilator voice, that's a reminder, at least it is to me after the prequels filled in some of that missing stuff, of some sheer effing hubris on Anakin's part. And Obi-Wan had to take Anakin down, and he left him for dead is what he did, and he didn't know he survived. But that's like saying we can't talk about Darth Vader and Anakin because Darth Vader's on a mobile respirator. That doesn't, to me, make any sense why you would do that. There are consequences to your actions. In Anakin's case, it was for turning to the dark side and trying to go all mentally irregular, I guess we'll say.
And sometimes things just happen that aren't your fault at all. I mean, maybe it's part of being an American, but Franklin Roosevelt, I think people probably would disagree with me, some people, but I think he was one of the greatest presidents that we ever had. And due to polio, the guy used a wheelchair. So what? Stephen Hawking was one of the most brilliant minds that humanity has ever seen. Again, wheelchair. So what? I don't understand. Maybe it's a British thing that they kept putting, evil people into wheelchairs. I don't know.
Charles Xavier, one of the most powerful mutants in the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
I don't understand people who are disabled. This is what Russell said, that there's a long history of disabled being associated with evil. Again, maybe that's a British thing because we're both U.S.-based, but I never got that assumption through the media that I've consumed. I don't understand where he's making that comparison.
Again, maybe it's something that's not in our culture here. Maybe it's something that was over there. I don't know. Very strange, but okie dokie. Because, that brings up another thing, like Ursula the Sea Witch. Disney just put out that latest The Little Mermaid, and Ursula the Sea Witch was very sizable. And so we're not allowed to have villains who are large anymore, because that's been associated with being bad in the past. Or ugly villains. Now all the villains apparently are going to have to be able-bodied, gorgeous people.
Let's be specific. Who was Davros in this new remake? What was his identity?
Well, he looked like a white male, and he looked like he just came out of a certain Reich. So, yeah.
Now, I've got a question to go back to Dr. Donna and Doctor Who. I I'm not sure I understood this as the story was being explained to me at the end. So, did the meta crisis, is that what factored into Donna having a transgendered child? Was that some sort of biological factor for that child being transgendered?
It certainly appeared that way to me. And at the end, when New Rose said that they will finally be themselves, or what was it that New Rose said? New Rose says, after all these years, I'm finally me. So that kind of makes me think that, yeah, it's because of the meta crisis that New Rose is transgender.
And then it was stated that David Tennant, because he was a male-presenting doctor, could not understand the way to let go of power is just as simple as letting it go. So when he erased Donna's memory in Journey's End 15 years ago and complicated the childhood of New Rose, did David Tennant's doctor torture this child for 15 years for the decision that he made?
Well, especially considering that Christopher Eccleston's doctor took the time vortex power out of Rose, which caused him to regenerate. So wasn't it a bit selfish for David Tennant's doctor to just lock that stuff away inside of Donna, wiping her memory so that he could just keep walking around? Why didn't he just take that stuff out of Donna and put it into himself like Eccleston's doctor did with Rose?
Again, this is all fiction, so I'm just going to assume he couldn't do that. But what I'm asking is, I think David Tennant's doctor, based on the dialogue in this episode, I think he is being blamed for New Rose struggling with her identity for 15 years. That's how I read with the way this whole meta crisis was explained at the end. And I don't know, to me, I find that offensive that you're blaming David Tennant's doctor for something like this, because it turns out all he had to do was just tell Donna to let it go, and none of this 15 years of it being locked away and whatever side effects that would have had on her child, all that would have been gone, because the child clearly was tormented because there were memories that she was using to build these stuffed animals of the doctor's enemies, at least during the Tennant run, and the shed that New Rose was using to make the stuffed animals, that was supposed to be her version of a TARDIS. So she clearly was tormented by the memories of what the meta crisis imprinted on her. And all David Tennant's doctor had to do 15 years ago was just to know she just needs to let it go and everything will be fine.
Yeah, that was really offensive. And I wonder, did Russell even realize that that's what he was writing there? That this was something that was inflicted on New Rose by the doctor and, let's face it, also by being passed down by Donna.
I just don't understand what Russell Davies was doing here. There was a lot here that I could have liked, because there was some stuff in here I did like. For instance, when the doctor was in the cab with Donna's husband for the first time, and the doctor had to kind of explain how he knew so much about their family, and so he was blaming it on Nerys again. And there was a little 10-second piece of dialogue where the doctor was fast talking his way to try to get by that conversation. And if we remember, Nerys was used during the Donna history Donna was
very fixated on hating Nerys, blaming her for everything, basically.
So even in this episode, there were a few times even Donna brought up, "Oh, Nerys!" Mm-hmm. It was a running gag with a callback going back to the Tennant years when they first appeared together. And that was funny. I actually laughed at that because the callback was funny and the way he handled it was funny. Or when you mentioned on the synopsis, when he bumped into her, he took the package off because he was trying to be a nice person. And then when it was Donna, he put the box right back. And then Donna was like, "Oi, oi!" Because she was getting all bent out of shape because, help me out here, you stranger.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, I really enjoyed the part when Donna was trying to shake the meep off of her leg. And she was not happy about that meat being on her leg. And Sylvia kept trying to convince Donna that it wasn't real.
As it's attached to her.
I mean, that was pretty good. I thought that was actually funny. And it's a shame that scene culminated with Sylvia hitting the doctor in the face. It really just took the humor right out of that.
Because the strength of this episode for me, and this is just what I said during the 3rd season of Picard, the very beginning, when I said Jonathan Frakes remembered how to play Will Riker. David Tennant and Catherine Tate, they remembered how to play their doctor and Donna Noble. And it was so nice to see those characters pick up again, because there was a part of this episode that kind of felt like a derivation of Partners in Crime. And that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. David Tennant still has the energy that he had back when he played the 10th Doctor. And Catherine Tate still has that gruff yet good person character that she played back during the 10th Doctor's run too. So the highlight of this whole episode was we actually did see an echo of the 10th Doctor and Donna Noble again. So to me, if I gave any recommendation for this episode, it's that. And honestly, that's all I can do to recommend anything here.
Yeah, because this really, it undid the tragedy of Donna's story, which was what made it so powerful. And now that's just done. In fact, they ruined that with that whole, passing on the meta-crisis and then just let it go. Oh my God.
But it still could have worked up until then. Because Donna did die in David Tennant's arms in this episode. Mm-hmm. And it was a good death scene. I don't mean like that was, people dying is happy, but it was a well-done death scene. And had she expired then, I think we might be talking a little bit differently about what we thought of this episode.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things I was hoping for was Donna sacrifices herself to save London. She passes, and then it's just Dad and New Rose. And then I thought maybe what we would pick up with is New Rose wanting to learn about this other side of her mother that she knew nothing about. So I thought maybe in the second episode we might have gotten David Tennant's Doctor and New Rose going in the TARDIS so we could learn about New Rose, because honestly, New Rose didn't really have a character, which is really odd because Russell Davies in his earlier run, I can't think of a character he didn't develop on some level as a fully fleshed out character. Even if you didn't like the character, at least it was fleshed out in a way where it felt like a person. Mm-hmm. But New Rose, other than being Donna's daughter and then adding some meta-crisis non-binary stuff on top of that, that was it. There was no character to her.
But New Rose wasn't non-binary. I think New Rose's chosen pronouns were she, her.
Well, I didn't get that either, because they're trying to play the word game here. Because as I remember in Journey's End, when Donna was melting down and she was ranting, she was in a conversation with David Tennant's Doctor about how to fix the chameleon circuit in the TARDIS. And then her brain started short-circuiting, and so she just started saying some random stuff. And I assumed the binary she was going on about was just computer, computer ones and zeros binary, because she was just talking about the chameleon circuit.
Yeah.
But now it's being interpreted here as some sort of identity politics transgender language. And because she was uttering the same phrase, like she picked up where she left off on Journey's End. But this definition was completely different. And what I'm saying is, I think this story might have been a much better story if Donna died. They didn't do this meta-crisis baby thing. Because one of the things I thought was decently explained was, leading up to this, we knew, just through press leaks, that Donna's daughter's name was Rose. Rose, at least if we're talking restarted Doctor Who, that's a very unique name for companions. So that would be like if you had a daughter and you called her Sarah Jane. Yeah, I suppose a bunch of people could be called that, but in Doctor Who universe, you call somebody Sarah Jane, you know who that's going to tie to. So at first, for a lot of this episode, I was rolling my eyes at the name. But then when they explained that New Rose had like echoes of the Dr. Donna, And so Rose must have been something that was carried over from that, because obviously after new Rose transitioned to female, she picked her name and she picked Rose. Why did she pick Rose? And see, that's the part that I thought could have been really interesting, is I wish they would have talked more about Donna and her daughter and like all these echoed memories that, you know, she didn't know where they were coming from, but subconsciously stuff was happening to kind of work through that. And so I thought it would have been more interesting to spend a little bit of time with Donna and Rose, like by themselves before any spaceship crashed or anything, and seeing those echoey things happening so we as viewers could go, wait a minute, something's happening here because some memories are leaking through. But they didn't do it. An exposition toward the end, well, at like 5 or 10 minutes before the ending of the episode, they gave it a big exposition dump what that was about. And what's that thing you usually talk about during our reviews? You want to show, not tell. And they told, not showed.
Yeah, I actually was surprised by how bad this episode was. It was actually worse than I thought it was going to be. And that's because I thought Russell was better than this. Like, the writing on this I found to be pretty amateurish. And it wasn't just the story from the comic book. I mean, that was some of the better stuff that was in this episode. It was the rest of the glue holding the thing together. The pacing felt weird, often really off in this episode. And it didn't feel like the episodes that Russell Davies had written back in the original run back in 2005.
Well, some of the things he's doing with the Doctor now, Molly mentioned this in the synopsis, but it's really hard to convey to the viewer. But apparently the sonic screwdriver now, in space, you can just draw a shape of something and it will materialize into reality. Because he drew like a rectangle in space and it became a touch screen, a fully functional touch screen that showed some footage of something. I forget exactly what the footage was. And then later he made these rectangular force field panels and he just drew them in space, and then he pushed them like they were some sort of a piece of drywall or something. He was just pushing it around the house after he drew it and willed it into being.
I don't know if that was in the comic. Maybe that's where that came from. Or maybe Davies forgot that he was working on Doctor Who and not Wizards versus Aliens. Or if this is a new functionality that he just wants to have in there now for some reason. I don't know. But yeah, I didn't care for that at all because, you know, there were a lot of people who used to complain, you know, during the, 2005 to now run of Doctor Who, that the sonic screwdriver had become basically a tricorder or a magic wand. And this really reinforces that complaint.
Yeah, because originally it was just supposed to be this tool that would allow you to like unlock doors.
A sonic screwdriver.
And then they added on this ability to be like a tricorder where you could get readings from stuff like how much radiation and then now you can actually draw shapes in space and it pops into reality. Another ability it had is somehow it could intercept a transporter beam and cause creatures to appear in front of him when he was giving that trial, which that's another thing. And maybe I missed this reference. Maybe it was a callback funny. But when he was in that parking garage and he reached in his jacket and pulled out this wig, the barrister wig, like, what the hell was that? I mean, maybe that's a joke he's done before, but what the hell was that?
I don't know.
And then when the rocket was stopped, and the visual effect they had when London was starting to get torn up was these fissures were opening up. And like Molly said, you saw like lava or fire under there. And it happened to just be in the streets. And then when they shut the rocket down, not only did the fire stop underneath the cracks, but it looked to me like the cracks were like zipping themselves up.
Yeah, they went back together as if nothing had happened. That was like, okay.
Because this episode to me, and this is just my personal take on this, if you did not have David Tennant and Catherine Tate in this episode, and it was Jodie Whittaker, this felt like a Chris Chibnall episode.
It did.
The pacing was all off. The only thing that was missing was a timer, but they did kind of have a timer with at the end that rocket was taking off, because Chibnall's known for those timer episodes.
Oh, yeah, they had that.
And it was David Tennant and Catherine Tate's charisma that elevated this, which also tells me that in the previous iteration, I'm now convinced it was not only Chris Chibnall's horrible writing, but Jodie Whittaker. Because if Jodie Whittaker would have been in this episode, trout pouting her way around the whole thing, I think this would be a rather average Chris Chibnall episode, because Jodie Whittaker can't lift the material up at all. Whereas David Tennant and Catherine Tate, they were lifting the material, the ridiculousness that was happening around us. Their charisma was holding the thing together.
Yeah.
Which, if this is the quality of writing that's going to happen, when the next series starts after these 3 anniversary specials, Ncuti Gatwa's not going to have that history to keep things afloat, and Catherine Tate's going to be gone. So you've got to elevate your writing, Russell, because you're not going to have David Tennant and Catherine Tate around to lift your material up. And that's not fair to Ncuti Gatwa if you're going to give him crap material from the get-go.
I hope the writing isn't like this when it comes to the new season. Again, I don't even know what to say, because there was an interview with Russell Davies where he said that this first episode was going to be pretty much, kid-friendly. But starting with episode 2, it's going to be scarier and not so much meant for kids. And I was like, well, what are you doing? I thought one of the things that he set out to do back in 2005 was to recreate a show that was meant for families to watch. And now that's definitely not what he's doing. So what is he doing? I don't understand what this is supposed to be. So starting with Ncuti Gatwa, is that going to be more adult stuff going forward? Or are we going to have a return to a family-friendly show?
In this episode, this anniversary episode, I appreciate we are living in 2023, and gender and pronouns is a thing that's just in pop culture. So I understand why it had to be in here if Russell felt that we have to try to be pop culture-y. But instead of this 15-year-old telling, I don't know the age because it's fluctuating, let's just say 1,000-year Time Lord about pronouns. Now, if you wanted to get that message across, since you're writing the dialogue, why couldn't the Doctor himself have asked how the Meep wants to refer to itself?
Automatically, without being chastised first.
By a 15-year-old correcting him. Because again, I think if they wouldn't have done that, if Donna would have died at the end of the episode, and that new Rose would have went with the Doctor as kind of like a mentoring type situation, I think that might have been interesting. I might have gone in and saying the second installment of this going, hey, this could get interesting. Let's see where this goes.
Well, I think you're right. I think this is going to be an apology tour, because even just that one scene where New Rose had to stop the Doctor and correct him, that's what I think all of this is going to be. This is all about being corrected and apologizing. I think that's why David Tennant's new face is back on the new Doctor. I think that that's exactly why, because he's going to have to go around being corrected and apologizing.
Just like Picard did in season 1 of Picard.
Yeah. And there was another interview with Davies from some Climate Creatives 2022 where he talked about how, I guess, today's audiences, the young viewers now, are active and they're engaged and they're passionate and it's their world, and that we'll all be dead and gone. So apparently he was hopelessly naive when, the speech that Eccleston's Doctor gave back in the second episode about humanity spreading out among the stars and how resilient the human race was, that would be hopelessly naive now. And
why?
Well, according to what Davies said, that young viewers now need things that are more detailed, and it has to be more honest, and you have to say it's going to flood. You have to say that the temperature is going to go up, and otherwise you're letting them down by not saying those things.
That's assuming that you can't fix those things.
Well, that's what
it's a science fiction show. Even in The Expanse, they built a seawall to stop the oceans from flooding in. So they used human ingenuity to combat the crisis that was going on.
Yeah, because he also went on, he was saying things about how he has this theory that we channel all of our fear and paranoia and dread about what's to come into our fantasy dramas. The apocalyptic future is now standard for science fiction film, and how we're channeling all that anxiety into the fiction and not applying enough of that anxiety to fact. I feel this is a very nihilistic way of looking at the world. Like you just said, in The Expanse, they built a wall to keep the sea out because of the rising ocean levels. And I think that Russell Davies is doing a disservice to these young audiences by just going along with their hopelessness.
The Doctor, I always took, granted in 2005 it was a little bit over the top, but the Doctor had his own way of doing things, and he was not a conformist. From the very get-go, he was not a conformist, and he was not going to go along with just some hopeless path down to nowhere. It's hard for me to imagine this is the same writer who wrote, because The End of the World, I think that's the Cassandra episode, and I think that's the episode he was talking about. Because at the end there, Eccleston said something like, because they were there to witness the end of the Earth. The sun was expanding and it was going to take over the orbit of Earth. He said something like, we never bothered to think that the human race would have lasted and endured this long. It was a very hopeful thing, because then Rose was trying to paint it as negative. What, you mean all these people on the Earth are going to die? And what a depressing thing to be having people come to watch. And the Doctor's like, no, human beings have spread all over the galaxy. Their legacy, cannot be measured by how far they are along the galaxy. This is just where it all started. And that was a very hopeful messaging. And for him to say that was naive, I don't understand how this is the same writer. I
don't know what's happened to him, but here's the thing. You need that type of optimism to be able to create things to overcome what looks absolutely hopeless. Because if you just accept things as being hopeless, then you've made them inevitable. If you just accept things as being hopeless. It's that nihilistic bullshit that I cannot stand. And by just sitting there and saying that you have to say the temperature is going to up, you have to say it's going to flood. No, you don't have to say that. And not because I'm some sort of climate change denier, because I don't want somebody painting me that way. But to say that it's just inevitable means that it's completely out of your hands. And it's not. Jesus, think your way out of this, people. To me, that's what the Doctor always was somebody who would think his way out of a problem. Things that appeared absolutely hopeless. And he would look at things from weird right angles to find a solution to something that seemed like it had no solution. Yeah. I just cannot wrap my head around this. And how little must he think of the kids that he's writing this for to say, well, they're just used to apocalyptic stories, so I'm just going to continue to give them apocalyptic stories. Because the apocalypse is coming. And he can't pretend otherwise, apparently. One, that's just depressing on face value. Two, what separates your new Doctor Who from that other stuff you're saying that everybody's telling these apocalyptic stories? What separates you? Why should people watch your stuff versus that other stuff? Yeah, apparently nothing, because it's just like everything else now. If everything else is apocalyptic and so is this, then yeah, why bother watching this? What we need now is hope. What we need now is resilience. What we need now are people who believe that they can make a positive change so that we all have a better future. We don't need people to just sit there and accept, well, it's gonna flood. And I want to go back for a moment, because along the lines of, I'm going to be kind with an interpretation here and say, Russell talking about, let's say, coastal flooding, if we're talking climate change, and he wants to educate and he wants to be honest. Fine. That's still depressing, but I'm trying to look at this from his point of view. What I don't understand is there was an opportunity to educate people here about transgendered people. And what did he do? He created this bizarre meta-crisis space baby siphoning thing
I learned nothing about transgendered people watching this episode, yet they were praising this episode going into this as groundbreaking. That's why I was hoping New Rose was going to go on the TARDIS at the end of this episode so that I could learn something about New Rose and maybe learn something about transgendered people.
The way this was written, how the Metacrisis memories influenced Donna's child to take the mantle Rose and to create those toys that look like all of those creatures, etc. It makes New Rose's status as a transgendered person a result of Donna passing down the Metacrisis.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it too.
Yeah, which it's kind of like she gave this thing to her child like it was some sort of disease. And that's not the right message to be putting out there if you're wanting people to be more accepting and to not see this as some sort of, well, illness.
This is my interpretation. But the story painted this as at the end of Journey's End, when David Tennant suppressed the memories of this, but now we know that it was actually still in her all along, that somehow that caused her to pass that down to her child. Her child, in the end of this episode, because of her non-binary status, was able to save things. So had David Tennant not did the Metacrisis thing, and had that not affected Rose and made Rose the way she was, she wouldn't have been there to fix things like they needed to be fixed. I just don't understand what the story was here, because what it seems like is what Molly just said here, that the Metacrisis, the memory suppression, it infected Donna. It was treated like an infection, and it infected her pregnancy. So this transgendered child was the result of an infection, not a natural process.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very negative message. That in no way educates me at all about transgendered people, because unless there's Metacrisis stuff going on in the real world, this doesn't help me learn about transgendered people in the real world. And Russell seems to want to educate me, so educate me.
And it also didn't appear to me that New Rose was non-binary. New Rose appeared to have decided that she, her were the chosen pronouns.
Yeah, I would have expected a they, them, or something like that if she was truly non-binary.
Yeah. So I don't think that this was really well thought out on Russell Davies' part. I don't think the message that he thought he was getting across is the message that actually got out there. I just don't think this was good representation for the letter community, and I'm disappointed because I really expected him to do better than this.
I could make an argument this New Rose wasn't even a transgendered person. It was some sort of birth defect from the Metacrisis, and that's not a good message to stick out there. This transgendered person was different than what's around us in the world right now.
Well, and the other thing is, will New Rose still want to go by Rose now that the Metacrisis is no longer in them? Who is this person going to be now that they're finally just them?
Russell Davies, I was excited because he did give indications he was going to write stories like this when it came to LGBTQ people.
Yeah.
I actually was looking forward to that because I figured a person from that community would be able to write an educational as well as a entertaining and well thought out story. But this story felt ham-fisted. It felt like Chris Chibnall wrote this story.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't want Chris Chibnall educating me about LGBTQ stuff. So that's the disappointing part, is Russell Davies failed. He offended me when he was supposedly trying to educate me, but he put out a bunch of offensive stuff in this story. And if I was a person in that LGBTQ community, I would be offended by what he did and the implications of how New Rose became. She's not a birth defect. This should be something that relates to the rest of the world that we live in.
Yeah. I don't know. I really don't know what Russell Davies thought he was doing, but this wasn't good.
No.
Like, by any stretch of the word.
Now, if you take out the David Tennant appearing and you just do the Meep story, this, as I said, I would imagine this to be a Chris Chibnall story. It's on par with like Kerblam and a very average Chris Chibnall story. That's what we got here if you take out all this other David Tennant, Donna Noble, and New Rose stuff. The only way I can recommend this to anybody is if you want to see David Tennant's doctor mostly and Donna Noble. But David Tennant's doctor, he was insulted through this entire episode. He was belittled, he was struck, he was told he knows nothing, and he was corrected on how to address an alien that he would have more experience dealing with than a 15-year-old teenager. I don't know what to say about this. I am profoundly disappointed. I feel like I'm rewatching. They took the Picard formula and they're now doing it in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And by they, I mean Russell Davies and whatever crew he has writing for him. Next week's episode is supposed to be the Doctor and Donna in the TARDIS. So that'll be a good indicator on whether this was just a poorly constructed one-off story or if this is part of a pattern. I don't know why people just blame Chris Chibnall for the destruction of this franchise. Stephen Moffat did no favors. Stephen Moffat took his series mid-Matt Smith and I would argue destroyed it. I remember ridiculous stuff like the Statue of Liberty being a weeping angel. That sort of ridiculous stuff that I don't know why people are forgetting that, and that was the Matt Smith era. So Doctor Who's been bleeding for a very long time. When you look at the ratings, David Tennant was the high point of this franchise, and it's been going down ever since. With all that on the line, I thought Russell Davies was going to come here and say, I'm going to put my best foot forward. If he wanted to tell this story, he shouldn't have told it as his first installment, because this was not a very good story.
I also question how much influence over this story did Disney have?
Yeah, because Disney is funding this now.
Yeah, I didn't find out about that until just a few days ago.
I thought it was just Sony and Bad Wolf Productions, but apparently Disney's got their fingers in this.
Yeah, once I found out it was going to be on Disney Plus, I was like, what? And then I was like, oh no. Was any of this Disney influenced? How much influence does Russell Davies have on this? I don't know.
Is he just a talking head that puts his name on the stuff? Because I'll be honest, this does not. We watched the Sarah Jane Adventures. We watched, obviously, the Tennant and Eccleston run of Doctor Who. And we watched Wizards vs. Aliens. Mm-hmm. And we've seen Russell Davies enough to know what his writing style is like. This did not feel, outside of small little pieces, like Russell Davies wrote this.
Agreed. Something was off. And I don't know if Russell Davies just lost his mojo or if this was heavily influenced by somebody else. I mean, aside from the fact that it was based on that comic book story. But even then, I think that Russell Davies, this just didn't feel like something that he adapted either, if you get my drift. Something was wrong with this.
Outside of a few little Doctor and Donna exchanges, this didn't feel like Russell Davies material. And we've seen quite a few pieces of Russell Davies to know what his writing style is like, and this did not feel like it.
No, it didn't. So overall, this was not a good episode, pretty much on any level. The messaging was terrible, the pacing was terrible, the story was terrible. Aside from what was originally taken from the comic, that stuff turned out okay. Some
of the exchanges with the Doctor and Donna were, I would argue, pretty decent.
Yeah.
But out of I think this was like 57 minutes long, you add all those together, you maybe are adding like a minute and a half to 2 minutes tops of a 57-minute episode and saying that was worth it? I don't think so.
Yeah. So this was bad. If you haven't watched it already, don't bother. Because if you enjoy watching the original 2005 to 10, when it was Eccleston and Tennant as the Doctor and Davies was the showrunner, just keep watching that stuff. Don't watch this because it might cause you to not feel the same way.
Which is exactly what we said about Picard. I remember us saying that exact thing. In fact, you might have said it, where if you like The Next Generation back in the 80s and 90s, don't watch Picard. And we're giving the exact same advice here.
Yeah, because Donna was my favorite of the companions. It was because I could actually relate to her. You know, the temp who kept trying to get a job and just didn't seem to be able to just quite get there. I could relate to that. And then the doctor came and swooped in and changed her life. And it was more just him supporting her is what allowed her to become the person she could be. Now, I don't even know what to say. This was just terrible. I didn't appreciate this at all. It took away from Donna's story, the sacrifice that she made. And
because the hope was, even in the Journey's End in the 2000 noughts, even though she lost her memories of that year with the doctor, there was still the hope that subconsciously she figured enough purpose in her life to have a better life than what she did before the doctor picked her up, because she was running around aimlessly before.
Well, and it's interesting because one of the things that the doctor said to Donna's mother when he dropped Donna off there at the end, back at Journey's End, was that she needed to stop being so critical of Donna and support her daughter. That was a good message. But then in this, Sylvia's asking if it's sexist to tell New Rose how beautiful she is all the time. Like, what the hell's going on here? This, every up is down, black is white, in is out. I don't understand. I just don't understand. This just doesn't seem like it was written by the same person who understood that the support of Donna's mother, helping Donna to actually realize her full potential as a human, her capability, her intelligence, etc. How did that same person write this crap?
I don't know. This is crap. This episode is crap. This is Chris Chibnall crap. If you decided you were going to tune in because you wanted a change from Chris Chibnall, when you just look at the story and not the characters, this is just a continuation of the poor writing of Chris Chibnall.
And the first time I watched this, I was angry. But on rewatch, to make my notes for this conversation I'm having now, that anger has been replaced by profound sadness.
Yeah, that's where I am too. I'm disappointed and sad because we could be watching the very end of Doctor Who.
At least for a good long while.
Well, I'm not a young man anymore.
That's a good point.
So if we have to wait a few decades for it to come back, I'm not going to be around.
Yeah.
This is sad because this might be the beginning of the ending where I will see no more Doctor Who in my lifetime, because if they go into Ncuti Gatwa doing this, this is dead.
And we needed that optimistic doctor to inspire us all to just keep trying. That's not what we got.
If this turns into an apology tour, why did the doctor get his old face back when no other regeneration has done that? If the answer is so that I could go around and apologize for all the wrong that I did, and as you pointed out, a self-insertion of Russell Davies for whatever perceived things he did in his old iteration story-wise that he doesn't like now, I'm done. Because I can't watch The Next Generation after watching Picard. I'm going to have to wait a few more years before I can try to watch The Next Generation again, because Terry Matalas ruined that third season, to me, ruined the Picard character beyond anything that I want to remember. And I will not go back and watch The Next Generation again until I get a lot of that memories. It needs to go fuzzy again before I watch The Next Generation. Of the Russell Davies doctors, actually, Christopher Eccleston was my favorite doctor.
And good on him for not coming back.
Agreed. I enjoyed that first season of Russell's. I know a lot of people tenants their big doctor, or even Matt Smith, but I think Christopher Eccleston, for what he was being asked to do, to pick up this role after the role had been dead for like a decade, and to also put a spin on it after the Time War, and this was a damaged doctor. That's why I often make excuses when people start going at the Eccleston portrayal, and I'm trying to explain that in narrative, after the Time War, he was a broken person. And season one was, to me, once you factor that in and you watch his performance throughout the season, you can see how he became a complete person again. And that also, to me, when Tennant came in that second series and they started spinning up a bit of a romantic thing with him and Rose, that first time that him and Rose were working like that in series 2, and there was a romance there. See, that worked for me because it continued in my narrative of the broken doctor. His world was gone, and he was trying to connect with people again, and he connected with Rose. That worked for me until it didn't, because then they kept bringing Rose back, and it's like, okay, I mean, now this is getting old. But the Christopher Eccleston stuff, I enjoyed that, and there was lots of optimism there. There was a lot of farcical stuff that made me laugh, still makes me laugh to this day, but that's okay. The universe he set up, Russell Davies, in that rebooted universe or restarted universe, was a friendly universe. It wasn't uber realistic, but it was a friendly place that you would want to visit. And you'd want to get in the TARDIS with the Doctor and visit these places. Man, ever since like mid-Moffat on, if somebody made me go in the TARDIS, they'd have to drag me and tie me up to make me go in that TARDIS, because all the adventures, from killing Hitler to all the other ridiculous crap that they did from Moffat and then Chibnall, like, I would have to go to therapy after being with the Doctor because of all the horrible universe that he showed me. There was no beauty there at all. And yes, I know even in classic Who, there was a lot of darkness there with the Daleks and the Cybermen, but he also ran across some civilizations that were very interesting people that weren't dark and nihilistic. So I feel like I've lost an old friend when it came to Doctor Who after watching this episode.
Yeah.
And this is a 60th anniversary. This is supposed to be a celebration of what got us here. And what it seemed like Davies was doing, or whoever was writing this, it seemed like they were embarrassed about what got them here to the 60th. This wasn't a celebration. It was almost like some sort of rebirth where they wanted to bury what came before and then start off with something new. And this was sad. This was not a celebration at all. And that's what an anniversary is supposed to be.
Yep. So, if you like Doctor Who and you haven't watched this yet, don't. It was terrible. You don't need these memories in your head. I guess optimistic Doctor Who is over. Even Russell Davies isn't going to bring that back for us. We're stuck with this nihilistic bullshit. Now it's just too bad. So, how did you guys feel about this episode? We can commiserate in our misery in the comments below.
Take care.